Cool. Welcome to the 78th episode of the Overclock podcast. Overclock with all the letters, all the vowels, everything's in it. Overclock ZA, you found us, so which means you know how to find us and you know how to spell, which is great. I am Lindsey Schutters. I am that opinion guy on the internet. Thatopinionguy.co.za is the website. I'm Sharpshooters on social media, SHARPSCHUTTERS, and I am joined as always on South Africa's most accessible tech podcast by Gavin Dudley, the editor of, can we say it, Gavin? Can we say the website that you just launched?
No, we can't say that yet. We have to build up to that. So let's just, it's like you say, it's breadcrumbs. Let's drop a few breadcrumbs about that website you just launched. Next week. Okay, build up the excitement. Okay.
But still editor of Tech Magazine, South Africa's largest consumer technology magazine on shelf. Gavin, how are you on this wonderful? What are days anymore, Gavin?
Absolutely.
Under lockdown, what are days?
It's Wednesday, whatever today.
But how are you doing, bud?
I'm good. I mean, there's talk of people going back to work, which is intriguing. Intriguing. Of course, doesn't affect you much. It affects me only insofar as I'll be like the last tranche of people ultimately going back to the office, and that really does suit me, actually. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about like remote work and how they're finding now like how little they actually need to do in the office.
Yeah, exactly. People are understanding what we've known all along, Yeah.
The
Okay.
one good thing about working from home, or at least the bad thing, with everyone being at home, everyone's going through a lot of Netflix, a lot of DSTV is being watched, and then DSTV got themselves in some hot water, Gavin.
Yeah, everybody out there, and tech companies included, all trying to make good with their customers right now. They're kind of trying to build relationships with their customers, whether they're giving them freebies, whether they're giving them payment holidays, whether they're giving them special deals. The mobile phone companies, the internet access companies, everybody's got either free stuff on the line or discounted stuff or something going on. The deafening silence from DSTV, I think, has eventually started upsetting people, mainly because for the first time, people realize how much content is very average, how much of it is reruns, and how much of it is very old, and so on. And now, without sport to distract them, people are getting quite upset about the amount of money they're putting down for DSTV. And there's been deafening silence from DSTV. This was an opportunity to migrate people to their services, to make good with their customers, and to build up the relationship with their customers who they know are at home and using their product on a daily basis. And complete PR disaster, dead silence. So
can I actually tell you what they did? They did do something, and it was quite
damning. Oh, really?
They tweeted out. So remember, there was a 10 Rand increase for all packages except DSTV Compact that
already
went into effect on the 1st of April.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they tweeted out on their DSTV Twitter account that they were cutting the price of subscriptions for the other African countries and not for South Africa. Like they didn't even mention South Africa.
That's like a poke in the eye. That's like a poke in the eye for South Africans. Jeez, man. I mean, their PR firm or their marketing department or whatever needs to have the Riot Act read to them or something. That's just insane. Yeah. You take this opportunity and you turn it into a fail with a capital F, a hashtag capital F fail, So, I mean, your typical, your top end DSTV bundle is now verging on 1,000 Rand, that's 900 odd bucks, right?
Yeah.
And then the product scales down from then all the way down to like $200-300, I believe, something like that.
I think those compact can get drops. On for like $150 now. I think that's for access.
All right.
Yeah, but that's like you're getting like one sports channel and like Mzansi Magic, and that's about it.
Yeah, you see, it's possible that DSTV is in deeper trouble than we thought as the streaming thing closed in on them. And I think they were clearly heavily dependent on the sports broadcasting, in my opinion. And it's possible they've lost out a lot of ad revenue on that. Who knows? on the one hand, they haven't had to pay the Soccer Federation and the Rugby Federation and the Cricket Federation huge amounts of money for the broadcast rights. On the other hand, they've lost out on probably billions of rands worth of advertising around those sports. So I don't really know, but it's possible they are in deeper trouble than we think, which is why they can't afford to throw out freebies to the customers at this point. Who knows?
Yeah.
The funny thing is that the Showmax service is doing so well, really. You know, at its great value, as we've established. Showmax is the streaming division of DSTV, which is it's trying to establish itself as a separate company, although most people still see them as interlinked. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're benefiting from the bulk buying that's going on now because of being in that whole multi-choice DSTV bundle. Yeah. But then talking about other businesses, you touched on it briefly now, like sport is one thing where they're not deriving any money from at the moment. But there's a lot of sports that are going back online behind closed doors without any fans and stuff. I have a friend who has some advertising skin in the game there, serving up some great advertising solutions for partners who are, and then there've been all those virtual sports happening as well. I know Formula One has gone virtual. One or two others have gone virtual. Basketball, some of the big stars have been playing each other in virtual basketball matches. Yeah. And I think the wrestling is going to be next, apparently, virtual wrestling matches, which it's kind of a bit of a stretch, but it's an interesting idea. And if you can imagine hyper-real 3D graphics 5 years from now, you might not know if you're watching a real wrestling match or not. But the interesting thing there is, like, the F1 drivers, for one, they have like a one-to-one conversion in their skills because they're on simulators.
Right, you're driving with a steering wheel, pedals, and you're
Whereas, like, now you have like LeBron James who needs to get on an Xbox controller, and it's completely different to does in the real world, and then like some 12-year-old will whoop his ass.
Yeah. Well, but it's an interesting ploy to extend your audience, you know, your NBA audience into the virtual esports realm. It's quite interesting because now if you know that literal LeBron James is going to literally be playing, I don't know, some other star on PlayStation, the chances of you watching are pretty high, I would say, just out of interest, you know. And it's true that their skills don't translate. Sorry?
Because you're not seeing them. Like, for me, that experience is there's a disconnect there. Like, where Max Verstappen is just as good on a game as he is on a track.
Sure. So I agree with you. The skills don't translate one-to-one. The truth is, I looked at some of the NBA e-sport games, and the person who was leading the championship was some player I've never heard of. So clearly, you know, it allows some second-tier players to show different skils.
And to show why they second-tier players, because they should be on the court and not on their couch.
They can get paid fourth-tier esports money as well for the. Okay, but interesting.
Though. So like, we're not going to have sports for a long time. I mean, until there's a vaccine for this thing, we won't have herd immunity, and it will not be advisable to send the public out into like these mass gatherings anymore. So then, where do you stand on movie theaters? Because there was an interesting thing. Universal put out the new Trolls movie, the Trolls World Tour, as a digital download, and like they broke all sorts of records. They made like $400 million in the first like day of release and stuff. And then the CEO said in an interview, no, that's their strategy from now here on out, is they'll release it digitally and in theaters at the same time. Then the AMC group of movie theaters said like, well, then we're not flighting Universal movies ever again. And then I was like, maybe you won't be around.
Hollow threat. Hollow threat. Yeah.
And then I was on another call this week pitching a client on the future of their business, like in the current reality that we're in now. And the words left my mouth. It was like, well, no one's going to be going to restaurants anymore, because I also have friends in the service industry who like joined up with small restaurants. There's a couple of guys in the media who also opened up outlets, eateries and stuff recently, and they just got sideswiped by this thing. And can you see yourself going to a restaurant in the next 2 years, in the next year?
Yeah, actually, I can, because again, if you consider a typical spur, you're all sitting, 2 meters apart, and and
Wow.
I understand that the food industry is lobbying really hard, especially the fast food industry, lobbying really hard to go back to work, just because it employs so many people, employs so many people, and same with the goods that go into restaurants, produce, and so on.
Yeah.
The supply chain for those restaurants is so big and so long, they consume so many things that it affects so many other industries. So I could imagine them all lobbying to come back to life. Although, again, who's got money to spend in restaurants, even if there wasn't a safety issue,
Like
and
for
we'd have to
movie
be...
theaters, I can foresee like TV sales surging now, especially in the larger sizes. As people start watching things from home, subscriptions to streaming services is going to up. I mean, if Disney Plus comes here, that's
really
the end
must.
of
This
a lot
must
of
be. This is the watershed moment where people cut the cord. And cut the satellite cable.
So it's just interesting to see where technology is actually coming to the rescue of some innovative business owners, and who it's leaving behind in the dust in the midst of this pandemic. Like you look at gyms as well. I'm really enjoying the kind of one-to-one experience that you get now, like on the Zoom calls and stuff. It's almost like it's just you and the instructor. Yes, I miss the equipment that I need to do the things that I want to do, but the interaction is really good. And if you miss a class, you can always just get the video and catch up on that sort of thing.
Yeah. Very intriguing. So in the next issue of Tech Magazine, we have a story all about that, written by your friend and mine, Mr. Arthur Jones. A great story about all the things that tech has actually pulled forward. He's calling it silver linings, which is the thing. Silver linings from COVID-19 that delivered by tech. Streaming media is one of them. Virtual conferencing, where we not putting down big carbon footprint and so on, is another thing. And families getting together with their extended families overseas, for example, things you don't think about. I don't know if you've done this, but we've had multiple calls involving family members overseas, people who we ordinarily wouldn't chat to, but for some reason, because we're all in lockdown, for some reason it's more significant that we have to see them on the screen, kind of thing. So all these interesting silver linings that tech has provided in the post-COVID world.
And obviously all of this is powered by cloud services, interconnected computers out there in big server farms. And you had an interesting little talking point on your note.
So for some time, Lindsey and I have been watching the evolution of Wi-Fi, watching it get better and faster. And to most people who are not watching it closely, you probably wouldn't even know what generation of Wi-Fi you're using, whether it's the good one, the bad one, the one that's enabled for multimedia, and the one that's got longer range and faster speed. And you wouldn't probably know. But we watch this closely and watch how it's evolved over the years. And the new emerging standard is called Wi-Fi 6. Which really is exceptionally good as Wi-Fi goes. It overcomes so many of the challenges that Wi-Fi has had. It's still not flawless, but Wi-Fi 6 is the new emerging standard. One of the difficulties with Wi-Fi 6 is that it's capable of transmitting data further and faster than any of the previous, but it needs much better kind of radio wave frequencies in order to do that. And those radio wave frequencies haven't been available until now. So now the Communications Commission in the US has released the 6 gigahertz band for the use of Wi-Fi 6. So now we will see Wi-Fi 6 start appearing more reliably in phones, in laptops, and so on, because now the bandwidth has been made available in one of these big dominant markets in the US for Wi-Fi 6. So 6 gigahertz band, just so you understand, the 2.4 gigahertz band used to be the free band where absolutely everything worked, from radio-controlled cars to automatic garage door openers to original Wi-Fi version 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on, all worked on 2.4 gigahertz. Then they started introducing 5 gigahertz, which still had many limitations. 6 gigahertz is the new emerging radio wave frequency that become available, and it will be far better than anything that has come before. So we'll just have to see how long that takes to reach us here, how long it takes them to start integrating it in phones and laptops and so on.
So I have 2 points. First point, somewhere in the middle of last year, beginning of last year, I started asking every technology manufacturer that I got to interview, like, what about Wi-Fi 6? Forget about 5G. And I called it, like I said, 5G is good for like other things. But distance. Most, when it comes to new age data transfer, are going to experience Wi-Fi 6 first, like in stadiums everywhere. Wi-Fi 6 has many of the same benefits as 5G, where you can like segment the different data that what do they call it, slices. So you can send like
technologically it's far more advanced than how much you can control over what it does.
So most phones that came out this year and towards the latter part of last year are Wi-Fi 6 enabled now, but this 6 gigahertz is actually a different standard now, where it's being called Wi-Fi 6, and I kid you not, 6E.
Oh no, just as they got it straightened out, they started fragmenting it again. Because up to now, Wi-Fi was called all sorts of things. It was called 802.11a, then B, then G, then N, then 802.11ac, then 802.11z. It came up with all these different names, and no one could keep track of what was going on. Then there was 802.16 as well that came out, which was the mobile Wi-Fi standard. It was just chaos, and then they went back and renamed them all Wi-Fi 1, Wi-Fi 2, Wi-Fi 3, so everybody knew what was going on until we got to Wi-Fi 6. And now they started fragmenting again with Wi-Fi 6E, which is exactly what we were trying to avoid. Oh, man. Okay.
Moving on swiftly. Gavin, so when I have money again, when I have gigs that don't, like, my revenue streams are drying up by the freaking week, as it seems, but there are silver linings on the cloud, and there are possibilities in the future, so I'm not too perturbed right now. But anyway, when I can afford to buy a new laptop, I've actually been pricing AMD Ryzen computers. Like there's the Asus, I think it's like the ZenBook 14 or the something like that. The one with the number pad in the touchpad.
Cool.
It's a Ryzen version of that that's like $5,000 cheaper than the equivalent, the i5, the Intel i5, with I think it's better battery efficiency, and I think a better thermal envelope just in the chip's design. But you got on here that Intel and AMD are now serious competitors, and I fully agree with you. But can you explain yourself, please?
Yes. So most people know what Intel is, because every time they build a computer, there's a little sticker on there that goes Intel inside. So they eventually have figured out that Intel is a central part of the computer they're buying. AMD was this underdog who's been consistently developing products that outperform Intel's products, which is the main chip inside the computer. And but AMD could never quite get the public profile, the marketing dollars behind it, so that your average consumer would understand what an AMD processor was, even though it has consistently been technologically fantastic and highly regarded by techies. So AMD struggled from an image problem, even though it was oftentimes beating Intel at its own game. But unfortunately, the world has just been it's been a two-horse race between Intel and AMD. All other players, it's so expensive developing computer processors, outrageously expensive, and building factories that produce them, that there really wasn't room in the market for more than these two players. Then mobile chip manufacturers came along, and they became very big companies as well. But in the PC game, it just remained AMD and Intel. In the gaming world, AMD performed particularly well. So gamers are much more familiar with the AMD brand, the AMD Ryzen brand in particular. And now what's happened, it's just been this two-horse race where AMD was always the better priced competitor to Intel. Intel was the Rolls-Royce. AMD was the Mercedes, let's say. And then suddenly Amazon Web Services, everybody thinks Amazon is an online store. It's not. Amazon is actually a company that runs huge data services all over the world, much bigger than its online retail business. And it was running these enormous data centers filled to the brim with high-powered computing infrastructure. And it was costing so much money to get chips from other companies to run these computers that they invented their own chip called the Graviton. And that chip is now becoming almost as good as Intel and AMD's chips, and is actually, for the amount of power it produces, it's much cheaper than theirs. So it's a better proposition for them. So a lot of their rack servers are built using their own processor. That's Amazon's own processor. And it's quite possible that in time, once they get scale on building those processors might come down to other products as well, probably starting with Amazon's own products like its tablets and so on. But it might come down to PCs and things eventually, which would be jolly interesting. It means there would be another competitor in that market with very deep pockets almost as deep as Intel itself, if not deeper. It's a question of whether Amazon wants to be in that market or not, because that's really not its core business at all. But then on the side, another company, a French company actually called SiPearl, S-I-Pearl, pearl like oyster, it's also started building its own microchips that are extremely high performance microchips. The reason for this is because Europe has an inferiority complex about building supercomputers. The best supercomputers in the world are now in China, Japan, and the US, and somehow Europe is always playing second fiddle. Supercomputers are really important for modeling the future, for modeling, global scale events and so on, and for developing new technologies and so on, but mostly for modeling data like genetics and so on. And Europe's always played second fiddle on these things. And now it's developed its own chip through this company called SiPearl, which is based on the ARM infrastructure. Lindsey's going to tell us about ARM in a minute, just so it can build its own supercomputers. But again, to build a supercomputer, you often need thousands, tens of thousands of these chips to run all together. By the time you've made tens of thousands of these chips, it becomes easy to develop them at scale and to then sell them to into other markets as well. You don't just have to develop them for your own use, you can sell them on. So it would be interesting if either Amazon or SiPearl develops a processor in the future that competes directly with AMD and Intel. But as Lindsey will tell you, the person you really want to watch is Apple. Tell us why, Lindsey.
Because Apple makes its own ARM chips, which is the ARM IP, which Gavin spoke about, which is the Acorn RISC microchips, and it runs on a reduced instruction set computer. So it's like a pared down version of what you have in your laptop or your desktop. Laptops also kind of skirt the line nowadays, but there's a lot of innovation of moving, because ARM chips are pretty power efficient, and it's a lot of bang for your buck. But the way they compile data and process data is a lot different to what we have now, the x86 on laptops and what you know as usual computing. So moving all of that, porting all those apps and programs over is a big problem. But Apple, they just make the world's best stuff.
I mean, what's happened with Apple is that it's developed processors for its phones that are so good and so powerful, they don't even compare them to other phone processors anymore. They compare them now to the processors inside your laptop. And it's been rumored that the latest Apple processors are actually more powerful than the processors inside a mid-range laptop. And that processing power is now inside your Apple phone. But Apple really are just far, far ahead of the market on this one thing. I have to concede that ground. And it would be interesting if Apple's laptops do end up carrying high-end versions of its phone chips in the future.
So what's been interesting over the last 3-4 years, I'd actually go back and say 5 years, since the rise of the autonomous car in earnest, graphics processing has become the big game changer, because guys are just doing crazy things with hardware acceleration there. So Google made all the AI chips that you hear about, all the AI, the artificial intelligence engines, like Apple has a AI neural processing unit inside of its A13 or its Bionic chips, and Huawei is always punting the neural processing. So all those things are just small graphics cards, actually, because they're little add-ons to the main chip. So they just supercharge the speed at which a processor can chow through data that kind of looks the same, consistent data. That's why it's so good for computer graphics and stuff. And then so Google created the Tensor Core, which they started putting onto their data centers first. And now then they used a little bit of Tensor IP to make the pixel imaging core, which was like the special microchip that they put on the back of the imaging sensor on the Pixel phones. That's why the Pixel phones, like, they only switched it on like in the Pixel 2, like halfway through its life cycle. But
interesting.
Now it's rumored that in the next year or two, you're going to start seeing either Google's going to get completely out of the premium phone market, or they're going to start pumping their own chips in, because the problem with monopolies like Intel and Qualcomm is that they then kind of buy up the market, and then everyone has to wait for them to innovate before consumer technology can innovate.
Yes.
So that's been that's why it's taken so long for PC CPUs to get down to like 10 and 7 nanometers, because Intel's just been dragging their feet at like 14 and 10 nanometers.
Yeah, it's because there are only two horses in the race, and the one horse is so far in the lead that it dictates how the industry will change. That's just very bad for innovation. I guess that was my point about having more competitors, is that not only would it drive innovation faster and speed up the evolution of computing, but it will also affect the price that we're paying for computing at the moment. As Lindsey's pointed out, AMD chips are much, much cheaper than Intel chips, but there's room for other manufacturers to come to market with much cheaper chips that are exceptionally good and disrupt the market in that way. So this is the only reason we're delving into this, is because it's really good for consumers to understand that our consumer choice is very limited, which is why prices for products are seriously controlled, because one of the core components going into every computer and every phone is almost price fixed by a dominant player in that market. If we could get more players into that market, it would change the pricing structures a lot, and that will really benefit consumers hugely, especially down the line. Okay, so that's our boring chat about why we should watch for new processor manufacturers and we should support them if they appear, like AMD, for example.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and those sorts of innovations will go down to in ways that you don't expect. So suddenly you'll get better, like, autonomous features on lower priced cars, for instance, because the computing core that they need to buy like just halved in price because somebody else came into the market, and then the big player decided to drop the price of the older stock. And the other thing, which is now apparent in the AMD Intel race, is every time AMD puts out like a legitimate rival to the Intel stuff, so like the Ryzen 3s or 7s, they put out a laptop a couple of months ago, and like 2 months later, Intel just kind of quietly put out a new laptop with a new processor, and they were like, cool, this beats whatever you had.
Yeah. And it just shows that their interest is not the consumers, kind of is not their main concern, Very disturbing. Making bank is their main concern. Yeah. Tell us about VPNs, Lindsey. Why is it that every time I'm surfing anywhere, I get these adverts for VPNs? Why are they telling me that I'm a candidate for VPNs? Could it be that I'm a big video consumer?
My apologies. You got me hard there. Maybe it's because you're filthy down, Gavin.
Okay, well, explain how VPNs make me a better filthy downloader.
VPNs are like a tunnel underneath the internet that you are connected to. That still takes that sort of speed of the internet, but it hides whatever you are doing or where you are coming from everybody else trying to snoop on you. So if you're like in a coffee shop on unsecure Wi-Fi, for instance, maybe it's very fast unsecure Wi-Fi, but it's still unsecure. People snooping on that Wi-Fi network can find out what you are doing and then start stealing information from you, whereas a VPN just kind of hides you in that sort of environment. That's a very basic way of explaining it, and I think I nailed it.
Okay, how does it hide me?
So a VPN is called, VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. So it encrypts what you are, literally kind of cases the traffic, the data traffic that you're sending up and pulling down in an encryption, in a ring of safety.
Okay, does that slow my browsing down significantly? Because now it has to decrypt and unencrypt for everything I click on, yeah?
It can and it does a lot just because of the way like data is sent over the airwaves, which is through packets. So different VPNs use different ways of making up those packets of data as it sends it across. So that and then you get also where it sends it with the key to the other website that you're going to. Yeah,
right.
Like it sends it with a set of keys, and it's a very complex thing.
I'm starting to understand what you're on about. So how does this help me watch the BBC? When I try and queue up the BBC on my browser, it won't let me do that. It says, but at the same time, these adverts for VPNs are coming up and going, do you want to watch British TV? Download this free VPN. So how does the free VPN make the BBC available to me?
So with a VPN, you can set an IP address. So you can set it for a different location. So the one that I use, it's called Wind Scribe. So like the wind in the trees, and the scribe that like writes with the pen.
Yeah.
Right. It's a free one. You get 5 gigs of data. So it will encrypt like 5 gigabytes of data that
while you're surfing to these places. Yes.
Per month. But then if you like give it your email address and you verify the email, then you get 10 gigs of data, which is pretty great. Most VPNs, I think NordVPN has a free tier of like 2 gigabytes, which is
Nord is very highly regarded. I think Nord has been a popular thing, but if, as you say, 2 gigs are not going to get you very far. If you want to use a free VPN, 2 gigs ain't going to get you very far. It's going to cut off halfway through your BBC News bulletin.
Indeed. Okay. So like my wife, for instance, she does most of her work on remote server. And that needs like constant like data streaming. So she chows through about, I'll easily say, I mean, we hit our data cap, at least not our data cap, our fair usage policy. We just switched to LTE data, and the fair usage policy on Telkom LTE is 150 gigs. And we hit that within 2 weeks.
Oh, geez. Okay, you people are bad. Yeah, that's heavy going. It takes some doing that. Yeah.
We're currently surfing at 2 megabits per second, and we're supposed to be getting 10, but we've been throttled down all the way, and just our VPN refuses to do that. So VPNs, like you can, if you're doing that sort of work, it chows through quite a bit. But on the free stuff, like if you're just surfing and you're downloading movies, for instance, which you shouldn't be doing, but if you are doing it, you only get charged for the size of the torrent file and not for the full download. So that's how those VPN caps sort of work. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, that's interesting. Okay, but now if we go back to your wife's example, what's going on there is that her company is obliging her to use a VPN, so she will have a secure tunnel between your house and their servers, wherever those servers are hosted, so that files that she uploads and works on and so on will all be secured, because they hope that data is only traveling through the VPN to and from the office. But obviously, if you're working on a lot of stuff, it amounts to quite a lot of data traveling back and forth. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and a VPN kind of acts like an Ethernet cable between you and the server. It's a stable connection, just because of how the VPN like packages stuff. So you're not as affected by like infrequencies in your own network as well.
Okay, so VPN would be to open up a tunnel between yourself and whatever other data source you're looking at, whether you're browsing on the web or if you want to visit sites in the UK that are blocked to people who are not from the UK, for example. Then what would happen is, instead of your IP address looking like 196 something something, which is the range from South Africa, it might say 143 something something, which would be Romania or Afghanistan or something other, right?
Yeah, and so then on most of it you can set that. The one that I use, WindScribe, is nice. I install it as an extension on Firefox.
Right.
It's not an extension for our new favorite browser, which is Microsoft Edge, which everyone should use.
Microsoft Edge, you heard it here first. We're big fans. We fully converted to Microsoft's new browser called Edge. Get it. Download it now. Don't use the version that's already on your PC. Download the latest version. Yes, keep going, Lindsey.
Yeah, so there's not an extension for that browser yet. I'm patiently waiting for that to run up. So I use it on Firefox. And in there, you can run it on autopilot, where it just kind of picks a random destination to say that you're from. Most of the time it's Romania. And then remember 3 weeks ago, there was a cable break just outside Portugal. I think it was between Portugal and the UK.
It was a difficult time for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and for someone using a VPN.
Yes, it's great. So you could route around the problem. Yeah.
No, I couldn't get anything done.
Oh, because it had to go through that channel, right? Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
So there are downsides.
So if you run the VPN as a separate application, then everything you do on your PC will run through the VPN. So if you check your mail, that will also go through the VPN. But if you use the browser extension, then you can confine it to just the browser data. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, because if you want to keep you don't want to use up your 10 gig cap, you might want to just use it for browsing or whatever. Or maybe the only thing you need to get in a secure way or whatever is something you're doing in a browser. So, okay. All right, VPN. So you recommend WinScribe.
Yeah, WinScribe is good if you're cheap like me. You don't make a lot of money, and you want like free things. NordVPN is really good. I've heard great things about Nord. TunnelBear is another up and comer. You might see TunnelBear
Nord. I've heard a lot of geeks punching that. Yeah. Okay. Nord.
And TunnelBear is another good one. One of them had a big security flaw a month or two ago.
It's exactly the antithesis of what you expect from. Okay.
Exactly.
But the point is, you want to look up before you install things. So a VPN is going to install itself pretty deep inside your PC. So you don't want to install 4 different ones and then end up with all sorts of communication problems on your PC. So I would recommend you figure out which of these has got the right data package for you. Or if you think you're going to be using it a lot, you might want to investigate who's got a good paid for version, that is simple and efficient and so on. But if you're going to start with a free one, make sure it's going to have enough free data available for you to get a good experience, like Lindsey's WinScribe, which is 10 gigs. Yeah. All right.
And then, you can use that account on your phone. I know on iPhones, there's an easy way to put in like your own VPN to use. I know a lot of people who run their businesses off their phones and in coffee shops and stuff who do that. And it's a great way to get around the draconian internet laws of countries like India.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's WinScribe, and we mentioned Nord, Nord,
Nord, and TunnelBear.
TunnelBear as an option. Yeah.
TunnelBear is another option. Yeah, that's about it for VPN. That's a quick how-to. Please, I think there'll probably be something on the Tech Magazine website at some stage about VPNs that you can go check it out on.
There should be. If Lindsey will write it for us, we'll take it and print it there for you. All this useful information, folks. Yep.
I think I will do something like that. Awesome.
Okay.
Gavin, anything else in closing?
No, we're going to get back to our sort of retail therapy next week, where we'll be recommending cool stuff to buy, because it might be more available for you to buy stuff. It's still unclear from the lockdown regulations whether they're going to start selling electronics anytime soon. But inevitably, even when we go back to recommending products, in acknowledging that everybody is having a particularly tough time, we're going to go with the best budget buys you can buy. If you have to have headphones, if you have to have a new TV, whatever it is, we're going to be focusing on the best budget buys. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Talking about good prices, there's a new DJI drone in the world, Gavin. I know it sounds like one comes out every 2 months or so.
Yeah, it really
probably
does.
One that came out before you had your issue, and then now there's a new one. It's it's the Mavic Air 2. So the Mavic Air was like a cut down version of the Mavic, which was really good. Did 4K 30 frames per second. So Mavic Air 2 kind of looks like the Mavic, is a little bit smaller, bigger than the old one, than its predecessor, but it shoots 4K at 60 frames per second, can shoot up to 8K, has a brand new 48 megapixel sensor, and priced at $19,000 for the drone, the new smart controller, with a revised way of how you put your phone in it as well, and one battery. But for a mere 4,000 rand or 4,000 rand more. So 23,000 rand, you get the drone, the controller, 3 batteries, a charging hub for all 3 batteries, a pack of ND filters for the drone, and then a fetching shoulder bag for 24,000 rand.
Oh, the fetching shoulder bag. Well, I've got to have one of those. No, but you're completely betraying the readers with your 24,000 rand budget purchase. Oh, come on, dude.
Listen, the only other drone that shoots 4K 60 is the Phantom 4 Pro 2, I think it was, or Elite 2.
I think you need to dial down your expectations from 4K 60. Any of you guys watching 4K movies at 60 frames a second? If so, I don't know why you're listening to the show, because we're all about cheap, free stuff.
You use it for the cinematic content, Gavin. You slow the 60 frames per second footage down to 30% to half speed. Get those lovely smooth pans, and it's all about the eye candy, Gavin. That's what the people are here for. They're listening to a podcast. The eye candy.
Granted, I've been watching a lot of drone footage over these weeks when we're all slacking off at home, pretending to work. Yeah, okay. All right, cool. That's it for me.
Done. Yeah. I will speak to you next.
We'll see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, man. Cool. Stop the recording, please.
All right. Find the button.